Yeah, but everything comes to us through our senses?
Yes, indeed, Bill. Now you think about it. Without the information your senses bring you, you'd be like a man locked in a dark cave. Your eyes, like your other sense organs, simply receive impressions from the outside and send them on to the brain.
The human brain appeared on the Earth some 5 million years ago. It took just a few million more to fully mature, a mere blink on the geological timescale. But what has evolved is the mind, and it's this inner universe that has so mystified and beguiled us. As far back as history allows, we've known of our ancestors' efforts to open the doors of perception through various means, including religious rites, hallucinogens, and sensory deprivation. Artists, by their very nature, look on the world in alternative ways. Alex Gray became familiar with the human body while taking anatomy courses at Harvard. As a young man, the artist also familiarized himself with LSD. For Alex, affecting the mind this way allowed him to move beyond his ordinary perspectives in unpredictable ways.
And you can never exactly tell what's going to come, especially if you do something like psychedelics. You know, there's an uncontrolled element about it, an element of surprise, of what the unconscious is capable of releasing. The psychedelics could be a great tool for the visionary artist. At least they have been for me. It's like a telescope or a magnifying glass into hidden dimensions of the of consciousness, transpersonal dimensions of consciousness, or sort of hidden, unconscious, ugly, surreal, weird kinds of dimensions. A person can go mad, in a sense, for a few hours and come back.
What is an out-of-body experience?
Well, an out-of-body experience is a state of being, a state of awareness, a state of action, separate and apart from the physical body. About 25% of the population throughout the world, I guess, has this spontaneously take place that they're aware of at least once in their lifetime.
No, what happens?
Yeah, what happens? Well, what happens is that you as an individual suddenly find yourself, for one reason or another, apart from your physical body, and yet you can think, you can be, you can act, but your physical body is in some other location. It may be only 2 inches away or 2,000 miles away.
Now, we've heard about people who have supposedly died and then have come back to life. That is also an out-of-body experience?
That is indeed an out-of-body. It's a rather extreme way.
You believe in that, then?
Oh, yes.
So in other words, if someone's in an awful automobile accident and the next thing they know, they're kind of floating above it, watching...
That's what we mean by a spontaneous one, as it were. And it is very, very common. And also, a very important thing is that everyone does this. The fact that you do not remember it does not infer that it does not happen. For example, during what we call delta sleep at night, which everyone goes through, is quite probably, according to our researches, the time when everyone goes into this out-of-body state. You don't remember it, but it does take place.
Now, is that like a dream?
No, it's something apart from a dream. It is a, there's no philosophic connotation in our approach to it, but it is somewhat a process of the recharging mechanism that you get during sleep.
When you first had yours, were you frightened?
I was totally frightened. Panic-stricken is a better word for it. And I went through, as a result, all the processes of medical examinations, psychiatric examinations, trying to determine why this was happening.
Robert, describe for us your first body. Can you remember it?
Oh, I can remember.
You still look frightened.
Oh, hang on. Very simple. I had been encountering a phenomenon that was like a vibration in the body, and I had gone to my doctor about it, and he had said, oh, that's just nerves and so on, and I would have to wait till this faded out, and it's not a physical vibration, incidentally. And one night I was lying in bed waiting for this vibration to cool down or fade away, as it were, so that I could simply roll over and go to sleep, because I didn't feel I should go to sleep, or couldn't, as a result of this taking place. On that particular night I was waiting, because it was a Friday night and Saturday was going to be a beautiful, bright, cold front day, meaning a good day for gliding. So I was lying in bed thinking what a nice time I was going to have that Saturday, getting into these nice thermal lifts and soaring around. That was with a glider, incidentally. And on that particular time, in the process of thinking this way, I suddenly felt something bumping against my shoulder. And I looked, and here was this, what looked to be the floor bumping against my shoulder. And I thought, that's strange. I don't remember going to sleep. And I looked across, and I said, there's no rug on the floor. I looked more closely, and there was something sticking up out of the floor that shouldn't be there. And trying to perceive what this was, I got a real close look, and it was the chandelier. And in desperation, I realized that I was not bumping against the floor, I was bumping against the ceiling. And I flopped around in the air and looked down, and there below me was the bed, and here was my wife in bed, and here was a man in bed with my wife.
Oh.
And my first response is, well, this is an odd kind of Freudian-type dream. And I thought, well, I better get a good look at this man who was in bed with my wife. And I moved over a little bit closer, and with a great shock, I discovered that the man in bed with my wife was me. And then I went through this great emotional surge that I'm dying, death is here, I don't want to die, let me get back in there. And so I swam down to the body, popped in, and how, I don't know. And then I sat up in bed and looked around. Everything was quiet. My wife was lying there in bed, and I looked up, and there was a chandelier. And needless to say, I did not sleep the rest of that night. The next day, I hurried myself down to my favorite doctor, and he knew I was worried, but he couldn't find anything wrong with me. And that began the search. I fearfully tried to avoid letting this take place again, and as things do happen, it takes place again, and you have to fight the surge of panic about it.
You know, I have gone to sleep many times and not remembered going to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I've had what I guess we know as dreams, or even nightmares, and I guess they're probably different. So how do you know it wasn't that, or it isn't that, when you go in and have an out-of-body?
It took me almost a year of very cautious exploration to determine that it was not a dream.
How do you explore it?
Well, first, you go just a little bit, and you look around, then you duck back in. Then you go a little further, as I did in the initial stages.
So in other words, you have complete control of out-of-body?
Mm-hmm. When you go through this in a careful process, you do, yes.
I would be afraid of getting lost. Now, I know that sounds silly, but what if you went out and went around the block or something, got lost, couldn't get back?
I did that a number of times.
Did you?
Yes.
Well, see, it's not so silly. You could get lost.
Oh, you do. It's amazing. For example, unless you have been in a helicopter, for example, over San Francisco at night, let's say you find yourself, if you're only 100 feet over a whole bunch of rooftops, and try and find yourself and see where you are.
Now, can this help people if they learn this out-of-body experience? Can it help them when they die, or they think they're going to die, or their time's up in this life?
There's a major discovery that comes with the result of such activity or practice. Without any equivocation, without any going past hope, belief, faith, you know that you do survive death. This changes your overview, your perspective. You have that knowledge, and it's not a religious thing. It's not a philosophical thing. It's a very, very pragmatic thing, that you do survive physical death.
And you also, as it says in your book, can take terminal patients and relieve them of their pain by getting them to work
This is what
out
we do.
of body.
We let them establish a beachhead where they're going so that they're totally familiar with where they're going, and then their fears evaporate completely, and they make nice, neat plans with some friends of theirs there to have a welcoming party, as it were. I've passed the 20-year mark in this exploration, and I think that I have done this for two reasons. One, to prove that you can do this and still stay physically alive. And the second is that you can do this and still stay reasonably sane.
My own guess, my favorite hypothesis, is that the universe is eternal in both directions, that the future goes on for eternity, that the past went on for eternity. In my own case, the reason why I think that the Big Bang is not the beginning is because the Big Bang is very special. Not only is it, infinitely dense and hot and expanding and so forth, but it's smooth, right? And the technical way we'd say it is very low entropy. Of all the different ways the universe could have been at early times, the way it actually was is very, very special. So if that is the beginning, if there was no time before that, then I don't know how to explain the fact that it was so special. It's just sort of a brute fact that we have to deal with. And that
leading a group of both mathematicians and physicists about 10 years ago, we found an extraordinary result in some of the equations that are part of string theory. As I said, what I really do is I work on a subject called supersymmetry. So it's got symmetry in it, but it's got more symmetry than you probably should want to ever see. We have discovered that there are mathematical structures that are indistinguishable from error-correcting codes, as does occur in digital information transmission and establishing reliable digital information transmission. And because of this, many people have concluded that the work that I and my team completed means that the universe in which we live must resemble the science fiction movie The Matrix, where we're all some kind of simulation of some program running, and that's exciting for a lot of people.
It's a little unnerving.
Well, because if we are simulations, there's some kind of substructure that we don't have access to that runs us as an app. So when we die, what does that mean? It means that that particular app was ended, that the app stopped running, right? But if that underlying superstructure still exists, and if there's no damage to the codeware, whoever is running this superstructure can re-enable a app, let's say Jim Gates 500 years from now. So Jim Gates comes back as a ghost. It's built into the idea that the universe is a simulation. This doesn't sound like the universe I exist in. So although many people like to say my work supports simulation theory, I actually believe that it's pointing to something far more beautiful and subtle about the nature of the laws of physics.
Holonomic brain theory is based on some insights that Dennis Gabor had. He's the inventor of the hologram, and he obtained a Nobel Prize for his many contributions. He was a mathematician, related scatter. For instance, if you defocus a lens on a camera so that you don't get the image falling on the image plane, and you have a blur, that blur essentially is a hologram. Oh. Because all you have to do is refocus it.
So contained in the blur is the actual image.
That's right. And, but you don't see it as such. And so one of the main principles of holonomic brain theory, which gets us into quantum mechanics also, is that there is a relationship here between what we ordinarily experience and some other process or some other order.
Maybe you can explain how the holograph works, actually.
Well, you saw it.
Yeah, but I mean...
You take the lens out and everything is everywhere and every when. Well, when you put a lens back on, then you come back into the space-time world we navigate.
We know a lot about the brain. It's 100 billion biological cells called neurons that are networked together and sending messages to each other in the form of electrical signals. But we don't know a lot about the mind. Consciousness is not the same as neural activity. even though neural activity is required for consciousness to happen. The truth is, perception is a reconstruction of reality, made possible by the sensory data that we have collected. It almost seems as if the mind exists in some other dimension, not in our observable universe. And I would like to argue that that is exactly the case. The mind exists in a separate spatial dimension from the brain. The rich qualitative information content of the mind exists as a holographic projection in higher dimensional space. The self is the integration of all your experiences, all of your neural network states, all the information that you've collected. It's constantly updated in real time with information that can be included or rejected or deemed redundant. So if the fourth spatial dimension is comprised of the flux of information over a given moment, then the fifth spatial dimension is the entirety of information collected by that neural network. So I propose to you that we are five-dimensional shapes. While our bodies and our brains exist in the three spatial dimensions of our observable universe, our minds exist in an information streaming dimension and an information accumulating dimension.
Is consciousness entirely physical? We obviously know it's physical in many, many respects, but is it entirely physical?
Oh no, I have to disagree. I'm not sure it's physical at all. So what I mean is that I think actually we've been hoodwinked for hundreds of years to reverse what we know. So if we're really going to be empirical about what we can actually know about the outside world, the physical world, we better at least first say that the only thing that we are aware of, that we can know, is what we experience. That's all we got.
Sure.
That's it. So first, consciousness, right? Then we have to start asking questions like, is this real? Is this real? Is this real? Right? Is the physical world real? How much of the physical world can be explained as a mechanism that's produced by consciousness? That's to me the more rigorous, scientifically, empirically motivated question. But we've been turned around to learn that, well, we can't be sure about this thing that we have called consciousness, but we know that this is here. We know this chair is here. Right. For sure the chair is there. Right. But this consciousness thing, who knows? Right. It's completely backwards in terms of the actual amount of information we have.
Well, I think anyone who has an experience of mystery at all knows that there is a dimension, let's say, of the universe that is not that which is available to his senses. There's a wonderful saying in one of the Upanishads, when for a sunset or a mountain and the beauty of this or of that, you pause and say, that is participation in divinity. And I think that's what it is. It's the realization of wonder. And also the experience of tremendous power, which people, of course, living in the world of nature, are experiencing all the time. You know, there's something there that's much bigger than the human dimension. And our way of thinking in the West largely is that God is the source of the energy. The way in most Oriental thinking, and I think in most what we call primitive thinking also, is that God is a manifestation of the energy, not its source. That God is the vehicle of the energy.
And those energies come from?
From your own life. The energy of your own body. The different organs in your body, including your head, are the conflict systems.
And your life comes from where?
Yeah, there you are. From the ultimate energy that's the life of the universe. And then you say, well, somebody has to generate that. Why do you have to say that? Why can't it be impersonal? That would be Brahman. That would be the transcendent mystery.
The child is changing his body to baby the baby is changing his body to boy, and the boy is changing his body to youthhood, then in this way you are changing body. That you have got experience. You had a child's body, you remember. Or you had a boy's body, you remember. But the body is no longer existing. But you are existing. Therefore, the conclusion is that when this body will be no more fit for existing, we shall have to accept another. The soul is not finished, simply a particular type of body being finished. The people do not know it.